Now, Keri, let's talk dough. And I'm not talking pizza dough. I'm talking that moolah, that money that we're all shooting for, right? Because you wrote a blog for Shape America called the CARES Act, a federal funding opportunity for HPE. Can you tell us, what is the CARES Act, and isn't any of that money automatically allocated for HPE?
Oh, I'd love to explain. So that blog post is actually old. We've had 2 CARES Acts now, and then we've had the Emergency Relief Plan and the Rescue Plan. Like, there's a lot of federal funding out there right now, including GEARS funds, which is government funding. It's kind of like, think of it like a stew, right? So when you make a stew, you have all these different ingredients that you put in it. That's all these different federal funding streams. You've got Title I, Title II, Title 4A, ESSER, which is CARES Act funds, and then, like I said, GEAR funds, and then the last round of stimulus that just came in, that President Biden put in, is an additional funding source. So there's technically 3 forms of ESSER funding, and none of that funding is specifically earmarked for health and physical education. But health and physical education programs can have access to all of those different funding streams if they know how to do it, or if it's available to them, right? That's the big if, because knowing how to get the funds is one thing, having access to them is another. A lot of those funds, and that's true for Title I, Title II, Title 4A, and ESSER 1, 2, and 3, they're decided at the LEA level. And so when we look at how does Kim get funds for her district, she has to do a certain process, right? You guys have a process. You said you work with your grants coordinator.
Mm-hmm.
But how does one of your teachers let you know that they need access to that funding? There's a process that you have in your district. That process looks different at every single LEA across the country. And so understanding how to advocate, who to talk to, and what you need to do is crucial. I think the biggest point to hit home is you have to understand the funding. I'm actually working on a guide that we're going to be sharing, hopefully not too far in the near future, about how Title I, Title II, Title 4A, and the ESSER CARES Act funds are available and what kinds of programs they can fund in health and physical education. So I'm doing like a crosswalk document between the WISC model and federal funding. So I've broken down, and like I said, hopefully that comes out soon, but I've broken down like the 10 components in the WISC model and the federal funding streams, and showing how people can get access to that funds. But actually doing that is a whole nother thing, right?
Sure.
Knowing about it, you have to understand how those funds align to health and physical education programs, and then you have to figure out how to make it work for you. I'll use Hawaii as an example, because they're the oddball state when it comes to federal funding. The state of Hawaii is like one giant LEA, with the exception of their private schools. So when we look at Hawaii, it is the state agency is the city, like school district, the state school district.
Oh,
wow.
So they apply for federal funding, and all of the LEAs are included in there, because it is one giant LEA. And you should really speak to somebody from Hawaii to get a better perspective, like George Centio or Aaron Centio. I don't know if you know either one of them. George does the role that I do at the State Department of Ed in Hawaii, but it's a very unique thing. So you can't tell a Hawaii PE teacher to go ask for federal funding, because it's done at the state level. So the state kind of acts like its own LEA.
interesting.
That looks a lot different than what it is at a small charter school in Arizona. At a charter school in Arizona, I can tell the PE teacher, you should talk to your principal first. Your principal should, be involved in the needs assessment process, because if it isn't written in your needs assessment, you're not getting any federal funding from any of the dollars, because that's kind of how it works. And so at the charter school, PE teacher talks to principal talks to whoever's writing the grants, and they might be able to get some money. It doesn't look like that in many other school districts. So is the money out there? 100%. We all have access to dough right now. It's understanding what ingredients to put in to you to get it so that you can cook it right and serve it up to health and physical education programs.
I see what you did there. There's that pizza reference there, Keri.
They usually say it's with the water.
It is, right? It is. And that's a great reference. All dough is different depending on what the ingredients you put into it and your knowledge about, how to make a good dough. Same is true for federal funding and federal dough.
Another mic drop. There's been several.
Do we count cauliflower dough in that?
Oh my goodness.
Absolutely. We have to address the gluten-free needs too.
Love it. So, Keri, you just mentioned about the process where PE teacher to principal, what we call a school improvement plan, needs assessment. It has to be written in their school's, let's call it strategic plan, right?
Yep.
Do you think that districts that do not have a health or PE coordinator, like myself in my central office, are they at a disadvantage of getting that funding if there's not somebody shouting out and advocating to be able to get that funding for quality health and PE programs?
So that depends. That depends on the school, and it depends on the district. There are some district coordinators out there who don't advocate for funding. And so they're not serving in that role for whatever reason, lack of knowledge, lack of support. They've been told they don't have the opportunity to ask for funding, right? Some of our big district level folks don't even get an opportunity to have that conversation because it's just not something they're privy to. And you might have and you might have a smaller district where they don't have a district coordinator, where all of the PE teachers are working together as a united front to get funding, and they've got the ear of that federal funding person, and they're getting the supplies that they need. So it depends on how well that coordinator is working and whether or not they actually are allowed to or understand the process in the most effective way.
Yeah, well said. I just wanted our viewers and listeners to know that whatever position you are in health and PE, you can still be an advocate. It doesn't mean somebody who to be a coordinator of a school district. You can be an advocate. Know the federal funding. You can advocate for it.
Right, and I'm gonna subquote RuPaul here. And that we don't do this enough in health and physical education. But RuPaul at the end of, RuPaul's Drag Race says, if you don't love yourself, how the heck are you going to love, is anybody else going to love you, essentially, right? So if we don't love ourselves in health and physical education enough to advocate for ourselves, how can we expect anybody else to show us love?
That's right.
So we've got to be our biggest fans.
And go ahead.
And I was going to say, we also have to recognize, and this is something that I'm running, bringing to the Shape America President-elect platform. We also have to learn how to work with the other people who are advocating for these same funds.
Yes.
Because if we come as the silo of health and physical education teachers, and if the arts educators come as a silo, and the CTE professionals come as a silo, we are actually fighting against each other for the exact same funding. Whereas if we come as a united front, working with our arts educators, working with our CTE professionals as a giant group, united front, we are showing people that we have solidarity in our professions and that we want these programs for all of our students, all of these programs. Because the last thing we want to do is pit ourselves against each other, because that just creates problems and it creates resentment, right? So like here at Department of Ed, when we have asks, it's our PE and our arts groups that work together to create asks so that we don't intentionally undermine each other, while we're all trying to get into these pots of funds.
Right. And one of the things that Speak Out Week and Shape America prepared me, I think the greatest message was lead with the story. So everybody can, like I shared before, everyone could be an advocate. PE teachers, share your story. Why is that funding important? Why is it, I love what you said, work in solidarity with the other ones. And that's how we lead with our story. Why it's so important for these funding for all these programs. So I wrote that down.
And, yeah,
More
and
notes.
how much stronger are you when you have CTE and arts educators showing the importance of physical education and health education, because we've taught them that. And then your PE teachers are advocating for the importance of art and CTE for the creative sides that are happening and the job potentials in the future. Like when we're all advocating together, we're stronger.
Right. And you know what subjects do not have to advocate? ELA and math.
Imagine that. Right.
That's what someone shared one time. They're like, ELA and math never have to advocate like you do. I'm like, really? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they don't, not for funding anyway, right? They probably advocate differently for best practice, but they certainly don't have to advocate for money traditionally.
Or